When making marks with a pencil and paper, they're going to have different characteristics. Being slow and wiggly versus fast and energetic. And they're all going to communicate different things. Whether it is mechanical and constant, or whether there's a variation line width. When it tapers off and ends in a point, it tends to add energy and direction to the stroke. When you end the line, the person's eye continues to follow the vector that makes. So thinking about when you end the line, be careful about which way it ends. Think about the difference between a needle and a fishhook. The fishhook will take you along and then at the last minute make the eye go a different direction. It's important to be aware of how your lines end so that you can help steer the direction of the viewer. So think about the quality of your line. Sometimes slow, tortured, and descriptive are very useful contour lines. Sometimes fast, energetic, pointed lines are what you want. It's all about your intention and having a repertoire of different marks to make in a given situation. So when you end a line, the direction it's going points the viewer's eye in that direction. So it's important to be aware of whenever you end a line. It's also important to think about when two lines meet to show clear overlap. That way, even if you draw something that the viewer eventually gets, if you have careful overlap, the viewer is going to understand it faster. So just practice your T's and think about what line is going in front of which line. So clearly end the line into the overlapping line. When you have little tails like that, overall it might communicate, but there'll just be that little bit of visual confusion. So you might want to just keep practicing on establishing that clear relationship between those two lines. When shapes don't have clear overlap, it's often referred to in art as a tangent. Well, again, that might communicate. There's going to be that little bit of confusion over what's in front of what. If I was to draw a similar thing as that, let's leave a little space like this. You can tell they're not touching, but it's still kind of confusing. Whereas if I was to draw, there'd be a clear relationship between these two shapes. This one is clearly in front of that one. Similar to that second example I gave, this is clearly inside of that one, but this one is a little bit more ambiguous. So pay attention where things come together and where things end. Practice your T's. Drawing energetic lines can make your drawings more interesting, but can be harder to control. A useful way of practicing control with energetic lines is to give yourself a destination in the form of a dot, and then try to start somewhere and hit it in an energetic way. Just like with throwing a ball, you want to look for patterns, and if you are consistently off in a certain way, start thinking about how you can compensate for that. Do you need to use your body in a different way? Do you need to use your elbow more? Do you need to turn your paper? Figure out what you need to do to have better accuracy when you're drawing with more energetic lines. When freehand sketching, it's important to start training yourself to estimate, particularly bisecting lines. So you can pinch measure, use your pencil to measure, and see how close you get. So when I use my pencil measure, it seems like I'm consistently getting little bit bigger on that half, and then I can use a ruler at the beginning to see where I'm at. So this is like 1 3/4 inches. And even with my pencil, I was still off, I think about 1/8 of an inch. But with sketching, you rarely get perfection. But it's important to continue to try to see if you can accurately-ish bisect lines, and then double check your work and look for patterns to see if there's a way that you consistently seem to misjudge things. In addition to estimating the division of lines, it's useful to be able to estimate different angles, whether it's a right angle, 45-degree angle. Get used to figuring out what different angles look like, or if you prefer, what o'clock a different angle is. Is it like 11 o'clock? Closely related to estimate is consistency. Trying to get consistency between your different lines. As you can see, it's not always super easy to achieve, but it's important to know that that's what you're going for. Consistency will make your drawings easier to understand, thus easier to transmit information. If I look at a box form, they all share the same characteristic, parallel lines. So when you're drawing a box form, think about what's parallel on the box. 1 2 3, 1 2 3, 1 2 3, 1 2 3, 1 2 3, 1 2 3. When you draw a shape, you're creating an inside and outside of a shape. You're drawing that boundary. What that shape is and communicates is defined on how you draw that boundary. Whether it's a box shape or some other sort of polygon or something more amorphous. The way you draw that perimeter, or the way you draw that line that establishes that boundary, is the contour. It can be smooth and mechanical, or it can be varied and nuanced, and they will communicate very different things. In some ways, contour is very much associated with the sense of touch. If I look at this little shovel and I run my fingers over it, I can feel very much that there's a little plane change right there. So when we're trying to communicate, we want to use every tool we have to clearly communicate. So that involves exaggeration and editing. So you edit out the parts that won't help, and you accentuate the parts that do help. Like a key that is shaped to decode the lock. A careful contour will help communicate the concept you're trying to convey. Sometimes it's useful to think of yourself like a key copier going along and copying all those contours. In the case of a key, if you're not tracing it, it might be most useful to start using those light construction lines and measuring so you have an idea of how much space you have to get those contours in, and then to go through and carefully put in the contours. While contours are great for establishing nuanced information, it's hard to keep things in proportion